Dollar. Dirt and money, no soul. Had to go and get it, ain't no time to kick it. Got a stack and flip for my foes. Dollar. Please tell me you can hear me. Don't turn your back and don't neglect me. Just let me know if you need me. Dollar. Let me watch out for my partners. Keep my money long, get my team strong. Let me run away from my problems.
Yup, what's good, original crew, man? We back. New Mr. Ballen. His ridiculous plan backfired with fatal consequence. Get the pad ready. Shout out to all my pad goers. Shout out to those who try to say the information we got is incorrect, but you know damn well I write it down here on the pad. You can't tell a motherfucker who write the information down that they wrong. Maybe you need to start.
When I hate somebody saying I'm wrong about something.
Maybe you need to start, you know what I'm saying, writing some notes down too.
Jot you down some notes. Mm-hmm.
And those who keep questioning what I'm writing down, I only write down names because I've fucked up names before.
Yeah, I be forgetting names.
I'll write down dates. Mm-hmm. And just like certain cities.
And like the cities and stuff like that.
Just like the minute details, like to... Like,
and if you new here, my memory bad, so I appreciate you for doing that.
So I just do that because I at one joint I butchered that joint with dates and names, and I just like, bro, I'm finna start jotting this shit down, bro. But like just the minute details, that's all I do. Other than that, I don't. Like I don't write nothing down. So so chill. But with that being said, before we get into it, make sure you check out the links in the description box.
Down below.
You already know where to go, man. You want the first part? All you have to do is check out down below. Also, if you enjoyed today's video,
like it with a thumbs up.
Well, highly appreciate it, man. But with that being said, we want to go ahead and get into it. Let's check it out. Let's see what this one is all about, man. Let's go.
Today's story is about one of the world's dumbest criminals. So dumb, in fact, that this story really won't make sense until the end when I explain what was really going on the whole time. But before we get into that story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So, if that's of interest to you, the next time the like button has a cold, please give them some Afrin decongestant spray and assure them it's perfectly safe to use it for more than 3 days in a row. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's story. At around 9 p.m. on Saturday, October 15th, 1988, a 33-year-old woman named Cheryl Petrie grabbed a candy bar off the rack inside of PJ's Market. PJ's Market was a little convenience store in the city of Port Orchard, Washington, and it was where Cheryl worked. She was the cashier. And without ringing this candy bar up, Cheryl simply handed it across the counter to a female college student who had just come into the store to talk to Cheryl. This student had temporarily moved right next door to PJ's Market, and the student, after coming into the market and meeting Cheryl, they had immediately taken a liking to her, and so it became kind of like her routine to come into the market basically every night and just sit down and chat with Cheryl, sometimes for hours. The student would talk about their day at school, they'd talk about their personal life, they'd tell Cheryl all of their problems and secrets. I mean, Cheryl really became this student's confidant. And believe it or not, this was an effect that Cheryl had on lots of people. Cheryl was incredibly kind, she was empathetic, she was a great listener, she never acted like she was judging you, and she never gossiped about people. And also Cheryl had a very disarming sense of humor. It was very goofy, she was always cracking up at jokes that she had made, and so people just felt at ease around Cheryl. And they typically left interactions with her in a good mood. And on this night, when the student had come into the market, they had told Cheryl that they actually had found an apartment in Port Orchard that they were going to be moving to, so they were going to be leaving PJ's where they were now. But the student had said that they really had no money, and so it was going to be a challenge to furnish this apartment. Heck, it was going to be a challenge just to buy groceries for this apartment. And when Cheryl heard this, she first congratulated the student, but then also said, well, hey, I'll give you some of my own furniture because I don't need it all, and that will help you furnish the apartment. And then also Cheryl had grabbed that chocolate bar off the rack and given it to the student for free as a sort of like, here's your first grocery as well. The student was totally floored by Cheryl's generosity and tried to tell her, keep your furniture and you can keep this chocolate or I'll pay for it. But Cheryl insisted. She was like, nope, tomorrow I will bring you furniture and please take this candy bar. And so the student finally relented and thanked Cheryl profusely. And really, this behavior was so typical of Cheryl. She was a single mom raising a 9-year-old girl and a baby boy, and so she worked 2 jobs to make ends meet. On the weekends, she worked at PJ's Market, and then during the week, she worked at a Ford car dealership. But despite being totally swamped basically all the time providing for her family, any spare time Cheryl had, she tried to give it to other people. Whether that was helping a coworker with their resume or baking some goodies for a sick friend at church, Cheryl was all about helping other people. The area of Port Orchard where Cheryl lived was only about an hour away from the big city of Seattle, but to Cheryl, this part of Port Orchard felt much farther away than that. She lived in this tiny little blue single-story house that was tucked away in the woods, surrounded by all these tall trees. The road to her house was very rural and winding, and so where she lived felt very isolated. It was a beautiful area, no doubt, but it was also kind of a bad neighborhood. In fact, a man had been shot and killed not far from Cheryl's house just a year earlier. But this home was all she could afford. Basically, Cheryl was poor and had almost nothing of her own. But whatever she did have, she was far more likely to give away than keep for herself. Eventually, Cheryl would tell the college student that she really needed to get back to the other customers and kind of do her job and not just sit here and chat this whole time. And so the student said, thank you again for the candy and for the offer of the free furniture. And then the student left the store, at which point Cheryl reached into her pocket and grabbed some change and dumped it in the register to pay for the candy bar. Even though Cheryl knew she very likely could have gotten away with simply giving out the candy and not paying for it, Cheryl was unfailingly honest, and so she knew she wanted to pay for the candy. Cheryl would man the register until 11 p.m. that night, chatting with many more regulars who came in and out, and then at 11 p.m., Cheryl locked the front door, and then she checked the register to make sure it was all balanced and all the cash was in there, and then by 11:15, she was calling her boss to report that her shift had gone fine and that she was taking off for the night. After Cheryl had left and locked the store behind her, she made her way out to her beat-up silver sedan car that was parked outside, and then she began the drive back home, knowing that she'd be right back to PJ's the very next morning, right when it opened at 7 a.m. At the same time that Cheryl was wrapping up for the night and making her way home, her ex-husband, Roland Pitre, who lived on the other side of town, was very excited. This was the night that Roland was going to win back Cheryl. Roland glanced at his watch and saw it was just past 11 p.m., and so it was almost time. He imagined how happy Cheryl would be when he unveiled his big surprise. She would run to him and he would hold her and tell her how much he loved her and how he had always loved her. Roland hadn't yet figured out how he was going to explain his big plan to win back his ex to his current girlfriend, but he figured he would just work that out later. The most important thing for Roland right now was showing Cheryl how wrong and stupid he had been and how much he needed her and how much she needed him. Also, he knew their kids would be totally thrilled if they got back together. Roland was looking after their son and daughter that weekend, and he had seen firsthand that his daughter was clearly very upset about the fact that her parents were split up. Roland and Cheryl had a very complicated history, but Roland knew, really, their breakup was his fault. They had met about 12 years earlier when Roland had been on leave from the military. At the time, Roland was a Marine sergeant, and he was also a very accomplished judo instructor. He was handsome and charismatic, and he had a charming Creole accent because he had grown up in a Cajun French family near New Orleans. But despite how appealing Roland looked, he actually was kind of a terrible romantic partner. Every woman he had ever been with, he had cheated on and then made up elaborate lies to cover it up. But regardless, Cheryl had fallen head over heels in love with Roland. And part of the reason that happened was because Cheryl was actually pretty insecure. She had long auburn hair and beautiful blue eyes and this amazing personality. But to Cheryl, she felt like she was kind of plain looking, and she also felt like she was kind of chubby, and she got the sense that men kind of did not find her all that attractive. And when she met Roland, she saw right away that the other women he had been with were these overtly glamorous and beautiful women. And so when she noticed Roland taking an interest in her, I mean, it was incredible. She felt so lucky. And so Roland and Cheryl had gotten married, they'd had their daughter together, and then basically right away, Roland had begun cheating on Cheryl. They ended up getting divorced 8 years earlier in 1980, and it was right around this point that Roland really just totally blew his life up. The woman Roland was cheating on Cheryl with was also married, and so Roland came up with this plot to murder this woman's husband. And the husband would get murdered, but when Roland was on trial, the prosecutors couldn't really untangle what his actual role was in the murder. It was not clear if he really was the guy who did the killing.
What the fuck?
And you did it. If you did do all of that, is this the same girl that you with now? Because he has a girlfriend now, but he wants to win back over his wife.
No, it's not, he doesn't have a girlfriend. It said he wanted to turn his ex-wife to his girlfriend. He doesn't have a girlfriend at the moment. Oh, swear.
I swear I thought he said he had a girlfriend, but he was going to win back over his ex-wife.
To become his girlfriend.
And he explained all of that
No.
Oh, but I guess I heard wrong, Cheryl. Because I was like, wait a minute, you did... never mind, let's go.
Was in the murder. It was not clear if he really was the guy who did the killing, or if he simply had kind of come up with the idea and other people had done it. And so ultimately, Roland was found guilty for his role in this murder, but he was only sentenced to 6 years in prison. And strangely enough, it was actually during this time that Roland was in jail that he and Cheryl kind of came back to each other. While Roland was behind bars, he had this epiphany that Cheryl was the best thing that ever happened to him, and he totally screwed it up. And so he began writing her letters, telling her how much he loved her and how sorry he was for being unfaithful. And also he began explaining that,
ain't this some typical ass inmate ass shit
That's
though?
crazy.
Man, bro, I swear, like...
You think I'm about to do...
But it be... Like, let's be real though. They like to go after those who are typically more vulnerable, you know what I'm saying? Those who they feel are a little bit more a little bit more,
yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I know, yeah.
Like, don't have that much confidence about themselves, and he knew that she felt, you know what I'm saying, felt lucky, so he like, oh yeah. They always do that shit. Like, I ain't never seen an inmate that don't. Like, I got plenty of inmates in my family, bruh. They all do the same damn shit when they get out, getting ready to get out. They trying to rekindle. They trying to find them a house they finna lay in. They trying to find them a single woman that's a little vulnerable, that she, you know what I'm saying, lack a little confidence within herself, so they can take advantage. Yeah. Man, I'm a cook for who they'll do anything to, they'll go have sex with you because they ain't been having sex. Possibly. They haven't been having sex this whole time, so they like, shit, I hear anything that's coming. Pause. But you know what I mean? Like,
you don't
trust
have to
me.
Say that. That's so like...
No, I'm just saying. You
yeah.
know. But I trust me, I have plenty of like people who have done real serious time. Uncles, cousins, like close family members.
Yeah.
I see it all the time, bro.
Yeah.
That's the only reason why he rekindled things, because he like, damn, and she the mother of your kids. Who's gonna be the one who's most willing to, it's
to
hard
take you back.
yeah. It's hard to come back into
especially
society.
Especially if you don't want to break that family. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So he knew that she's already weak and vulnerable. I can woo her in with words. You can sit there all day damn long and sell and come up with some shit.
He loved her and how sorry he was for being unfaithful. And also he began explaining that, the charges he was found guilty of in connection to this murder were totally not true, that he had been screwed. And Cheryl had eventually begun writing back to Roland, telling him that she still loved him too. And they actually would get remarried while Roland was in prison. And then when he got out of prison, he moved in with Cheryl and their daughter in Port Orchard, and they would have another baby together, their son, and then also Roland enrolled in nursing school. And so for a time, this family was back together and everything was great. But eventually, Roland went back to his old ways and began cheating on Cheryl again, and before long, the couple had separated again and began living separately. And so fast forward back to the night of October 15th, 1988, and Roland is anxiously waiting to begin this big plan to win Cheryl back, and he glances at his watch and he sees it's now 11:30 p.m., which means it's go time. And so Roland, he stands up really quickly and begins walking towards the front door of his house when suddenly he feels so lightheaded that he actually falls back on the couch and passes out cold. Roland had serious blood pressure issues, and sometimes if he stood up too quickly, it would make him feel really dizzy and he would faint. And so that's what happened. And then at some point after he fainted, Roland kind of came to, but he was in such a fog mentally that instead of, going out and doing this big plan to win Cheryl back, he just kind of wandered his way upstairs and climbed in bed with his girlfriend and fell asleep for the rest of the night.
You owe me an apology.
I said my bad.
Say
damn.
I'm sorry for saying you was
So
wrong.
how the fuck you trying to win?
That was the point. He was like, he has a girlfriend, but he wants his ex-wife or wife back.
Right,
and he hasn't explained to his girlfriend, like, hey, I want to go back to my wife. But he said he'll figure that out later.
But if she upstairs in bed, how you finna...
He was going to probably make up a lie about that, the reason why he never came home or was out late or whatever, because it's already 11:30.
All right, let's get back to it.
Yeah.
Cheryl was due back at PJ's Market the next morning at 7 a.m. She was going to open the store and also drop off that furniture with the college student. But when the first customers, including that college student, arrived at PJ's Market, they saw the door was locked and the lights were off inside. Now, all of these customers knew Cheryl really well, and they really liked her, and they knew she should have been there by that point. This was totally uncharacteristic of Cheryl to not be there on time, and so it wasn't long before these patrons began calling Cheryl at her home. But Cheryl never picked up. However, remember, this is 1988, so people didn't have cell phones, they used landlines, and so it was totally normal to periodically call someone and not have them pick up. It just meant they weren't home. Now, at first, people in Port Orchard just kind of assumed that, there must be a rational explanation for why Cheryl is not at work. Maybe there was a family emergency, maybe her car didn't start, but there had to be some sort of reasonable reason for her absence. That night, Cheryl didn't show up at Roland and his girlfriend's house to collect her daughter and son. Now, Roland didn't know that Cheryl had missed work all day that day, and so he assumed Cheryl must just be running late. But by 6:30 p.m. that night, when still Cheryl had not arrived and she hadn't called, Roland finally called Cheryl, but she didn't answer, and so Roland just left Cheryl this very upbeat message on her answering machine and then waited for her to call back. But despite how cheerful this message was that Roland left, it kind of betrayed the way he actually felt. Roland was not happy. That morning, when he had woken up and realized he had slept through the night and not done the big plan to win Cheryl back, he felt so stupid. He had this chance to win her back, and he blew it. But over the next couple of hours, when Cheryl did not return Roland's call, he went from being solely worried about, how he blew this opportunity to win his ex-wife back to now just being concerned about his ex-wife. Where is she? What's going on? And so late that night, Roland would actually call the police and report Cheryl missing. A deputy came out to Roland's house to take down this report, and then Roland actually gave the deputy a spare key to Cheryl's place, and then this deputy went to Cheryl's house. It was totally quiet. He knocked. There was no answer. He let himself inside using this spare key, and he found the home was totally in order. There was no sign of any disturbance whatsoever. The deputy eventually walked over to Cheryl's answering machine, and he saw there was a blinking light, which meant there were messages that had not been played yet. And so he hit play, and the first message was from Cheryl's daughter, who was calling to say goodnight and I love you. And then there were several messages from customers from PJ's Market that were calling to ask, why Cheryl was not at work and was she okay. There was a message from Cheryl's boss also asking, what's going on? Why aren't you at work? And then there was that message from Roland, who had called when she had not come to pick up the kids. And then the last message on the machine played, and when the deputy heard it, he knew something was terribly wrong. The last message was from a stranger who was calling Cheryl to be like, hey, I found your purse floating in Lake Union, which is near Seattle. And the stranger was like, I don't know if your purse was stolen and dumped here, or if you were here and you left it in the water or something, but I'd love to give the purse back to you. And the stranger left a phone number for Cheryl to call so she could come and pick up her purse. Lake Union was only about an hour away from Port Orchard, where Cheryl lived, but there was just no real reason she would ever be around Lake Union. She never went on trips. She didn't have the time or money to, even for short ones, like going to Lake Union an hour away. And then also, Cheryl's entire life was in Port Orchard, and her life was her kids, her jobs, and the church. And so there was just no logical explanation for why Cheryl's purse would be in Lake Union. But regardless, detectives from Port Orchard, along with police from Seattle, linked up and went out to Lake Union and began looking for Cheryl's car. Because maybe she did go out here, maybe she did lose her purse in the water, and maybe she's still here. But Lake Union is a very busy place with lots of people and businesses living right along the water's edge, and even more people living right on the water in houseboats. And so there were literally thousands and thousands of cars all over Lake Union, so trying to find Cheryl's nondescript silver sedan took some time. But on the night of October 19th, so 3 days after Cheryl had failed to show up at PJ's Market for that 7 a.m. opening, police would find her car near Lake Union. And at first, it seemed like, Cheryl must have just driven here and abandoned the car for some reason, because there was no sign of a struggle inside or outside of the car. There was nothing strange about this car. It was just parked in a lot. But when authorities went around to the back of the car and used a screwdriver to pop open the trunk, they realized right away that that could not have been what happened, because Cheryl was in the trunk, and she was deceased and very clearly had been beaten to death. The investigation into Cheryl's murder would take more than a decade. The police started with Roland because 1, he was Cheryl's ex-husband, and 2, because Roland had previously been convicted for his role in a murder, even though the details of exactly what he did were never really clear. But Roland had an alibi that was airtight. He had witnesses that could confirm he was nowhere near Lake Union or Cheryl on the night that she was killed. And Roland was very cooperative with police after finding out what happened to his ex-wife. He was really bent out of shape. And so Roland very quickly signed paperwork to allow detectives to come into his home and search it and search all of his things. And he also began regularly contacting the police to offer up any information he could think of that could be useful, including an odd story he told about this young man that was following Cheryl around in the few days before she died. He didn't know much about it, but he knew there was something odd happening with this young man. Now, Roland didn't really have much more information than this suggestion that somebody was following her around, and so police were never really able to fully follow up on that lead. But police did interview virtually everybody in Cheryl's life, from her friends to her family to her co-workers at the Ford dealership and PJ's Market. They talked to people at church who knew her, and nobody really popped up as being very suspicious. Basically, everyone said, look, Cheryl was this incredible person who everybody seemed to love. Right. It makes no sense that somebody would want to harm her. But
what you thinking, C?
If at first I was thinking, I'm like, did Roland possibly did go meet up with her? At first, I'm thinking that. And I'm like, well, okay, if they have ruled him out, for real ruled him out, and now we have someone following and they can't find any lead with that. The only other thing I would think about is this new friend person student that's in the picture.
Did we say if it was a boy or girl?
I think it's a girl, but I'm not. I think he said it was a girl.
Okay. I can't remember.
But that don't mean that she ain't got friends and people and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? But then also I'm like, well, I'm not just gonna put that because like she ain't came back in the picture anymore. And what reason would you have to do that? You know what I'm saying? So now I'm like, did she have like a boyfriend that we don't know about, or someone she was seeing, or you know, I don't know.
I'm still stuck on Roland.
It's random.
A little bit. Only reason why I'm saying, like, if for those who have already seen, you know,
yeah.
Right now, on this point, I'm stuck on Roland. Reason why you have had previous tendencies to commit relationship crimes. Just because you passed out doesn't necessarily mean that story is true. True. But because
we don't know his involvement really in the first situation.
Let me say this though. The reason why I'm saying that is because just because you passed out, your girl was already in the bed laying down. You say you passed out, you was down there for a while. Wouldn't she have came and got you to, hey, you okay? You know what I'm saying? Oh, like, come on.
Maybe not. Like, sometimes you can be in the bed, fall asleep. I'm, still down. Maybe not. Maybe that was just the thing. And then since he had his kids.
But that's not, that does. What I'm saying is she can't get him like a good alibi.
Then I was thinking that.
She'll say, yes, I was here with him and all that, but if you were asleep in the bed, the kids was in the bed, he knew what time she got off work. He was prepared. You get what I'm saying? Yeah. And she probably did stop by I'm just saying a lot of things could have been, I don't know.
My only thing would be, how long were you down there? Because the drive from where she was found to where she lives is an hour. So how long were you down there? And do you like probably you'll have to have somebody to assist you to get back because her car is there. So that's an hour there. And then an hour back. So it still would have had to take some time. It would have took some time.
And he couldn't do it by himself. Unless he hit the car somewhere else, took it later. But still, it doesn't.
As of now,
the time is not.
As of now, I'm not 100% looking at him. Yeah. But
or unless
possibly.
the girlfriend was involved. You know
or that, possibly.
You never know. Like, shit. Hey, this is on. We see it's A&E. A&E used to be my shit back in the day. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. That oxygen. You know, if you know, you know. But
or when she was walking out to her car.
You still.
Or when she was walking out to her car, did somebody like?
Because this is the 80s.
And made her drive an hour away from, you know what I'm saying?
Not that part. I don't think that part, though.
I don't know. I'm just thinking of every possible thing because it's just so like, why her?
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be shocking whoever it is, though.
A year after Cheryl's death, the police would get their first big break in this case. A newspaper journalist contacted the police to let them know that this random young man had contacted him and confessed to killing Cheryl and then hung up without giving his name or his location or how to get in touch with him again. It was almost like this person had called just to get this huge secret off their chest somewhat anonymously. The police convinced the journalist to actually write a story about this strange call he got to see if maybe they could flush out this young man who had just confessed. And when this article ran in the newspaper, one of Cheryl's old coworkers from the car dealership called the police to be like, hey, there was this young man who worked at this dealership with us and with Cheryl who was totally creepy and definitely had a thing for Cheryl. The coworker said this guy's name was Albie Brotsweller and that he worked in the garage and he was known as a kind of odd guy with a short temper who totally creeped out all the women who worked at the dealership. And this coworker would tell police that before Cheryl died, she had been working with Albie on his resume. And while they had been working together, Albie had developed this weird fixation on Cheryl. And when police began looking into Albie, they discovered he had quit his job at the dealership a day before Cheryl went missing, and then a couple of days after he had quit, so by this point Cheryl has been found murdered, one of Cheryl's colleagues said they saw Albie, and he had this really deep cut on his hand that he kept wrapped in a big bandage. Detectives would also discover that Albee's father lived right near PJ's Market, and Albee's mother lived right near the area where Cheryl's car had been found, out near Lake Union. And so suddenly, Roland's previously odd-seeming story about some random young man following Cheryl around before she was murdered made a lot of sense.
Now, hey, take away everything we just previously stated. Let's go on back to. I'm saying every little scenario we came up with.
No, I came up with a good scenario. I think with her coming out the store. If his
I'm saying everything.
Okay.
Some random young man following Cheryl around before she was murdered made a lot of sense. It seemed like Albee was this strange young man Roland was talking about. When detectives tracked Albee down, he was sullen and totally uncooperative. But eventually, the police got him to talk, and he would tell them that he had cut his hand fishing. And so police rounded up all these people Albee said he had been fishing with when he cut his hand, and in separate interviews, all of those people confirmed that Albee was telling the truth. Okay. And also police knew that even though circumstantially Albee looked really suspicious, there was not a single shred of actual evidence that tied him to Cheryl's death. And so pretty quickly, Albee was let go, and the police at that point kind of hit a dead end in this case. And in fact, the case went totally cold at this point. And then one day in 2002, so 14 years after Cheryl was murdered, a man in prison got word out to police that he actually knew exactly who killed Cheryl. He said the murderer's name was Frederick J. McKee, and that he was currently incarcerated for cooking meth. Now, we don't know exactly how this inmate knew Frederick was the killer, but this inmate who called police was cellmates with Frederick McKee, and so very likely he overheard Frederick say something incriminating, and so this inmate called the police. And so police got a DNA sample from McKee, and they compared his sample to the skin cells that were found on the duct tape that had been used to bind Cheryl's hands when she was killed, and unbelievably, it was a match. Frederick was the killer. But as police dug deeper, they quickly realized that, Frederick's heinous actions of actually killing Cheryl was not the worst part of the story. The story of what really happened to Cheryl Pitre was so insanely nonsensical that right away, newspapers all over the country began to cover it. It was converted into a true crime documentary, and even a famous author wrote a book about it. I mean, this story really was just totally sensational. First, I'm going to give you the facts of what happened to Cheryl. And then I'm going to give you the absurd and tragic explanation for why these things happened to Cheryl.
I got an idea. I don't want to. Got an idea?
On the night of October 15th, 1988, so the night that Cheryl disappeared, the meth cook, Frederick J. McKee, ambushed Cheryl as she came home from PJ's Market. We don't know exactly where the ambush happened, but we think it happened right outside of Cheryl's home. And after he ambushed her, he forced her into her own trunk, he bound her hands, and then began savagely beating her. Now, based on her injuries, Cheryl obviously put up a big fight, kicking and punching and trying her best to get out of the trunk, but eventually Frederick had taken the actual metal of the trunk and began slamming it down on Cheryl's face, and that allowed him to overpower her and eventually beat her to death. And then after she was dead, he shut the trunk with Cheryl inside of her car, and then he drove her car all the way out to Lake Union, and then he abandoned the car with Cheryl still inside of it and chucked her purse into the water. But this terrible night was not supposed to go this way. Here's what was going on in the background. At the same time that Cheryl was closing up shop at PJ's Market and beginning her trip back home, her ex-husband, Roland, on the other side of town, was sitting in his house, anxiously checking his watch, waiting for the right time to launch this big plan that was going to win Cheryl back. Yeah. Roland's big plan was that he was going to save Cheryl's life. He had hired his buddy, Frederick J. McKee, the meth cook, who he had met in prison, and he had given Frederick a spare key to Cheryl's house.
I already knew it. I knew the plot.
When he was like, this was the big plan, I said, this was his big fucking plan.
I knew the
Excuse
plot.
my language, but I was like, this is his big plan. But I'm like,
So
you
don't
went
excuse.
about it a whole different way. Like what?
So don't excuse what I said earlier.
I don't excuse nothing we said
No.
earlier.
No. Remember I said excuse what I said earlier. Now, take
Because
it back.
I was like, somebody probably did ambush her. I said at the store, but then the reason why I said at the store because I was like, she never went by to pick up the kids, but it was at her home, so I guess she went home first and she was gonna pick up the kids.
She was never supposed to pick up the kids.
Yeah,
it was his weekend to take care of the
yeah,
kids.
yeah.
So
now that's
how are
making
you
sense.
gonna? Why are you waiting for her? And you knew her time. Like remember I said he knew what time she was getting off.
Yeah.
I said only way he could have did something, he had to have help. And then when I was thinking about it, I was like, huh. When I paused and I said, do you got an idea? And you said, nah. I said, I got an idea in my head, but I ain't want to speak on it. Because,
And the only reason I was saying earlier, I was like, technically his alibi wasn't
Go.
nothing.
Go. No, go.
I was just saying when Ballen said that his Roland alibi was like airtight. I'm like, technically, I'm like, it wasn't because old girl was
Sleep.
in the bed. He didn't confirm if she was asleep or not, but she was upstairs and now she's asleep. So you don't know what time he got in the bed. Exactly, like it's already 11:30. You should have been in the bed. You know what I'm saying? Like if she already asleep, you should have been asleep already or already in the bed. So
not necessarily. Couples don't always go to sleep at the same time.
I'm not saying they go to sleep at the same time, but I'm just saying if she already in the bed and you're not in the bed, technically you can't say what time he got in the bed or not.
Yeah. All you can do is say he was at home last night, and then you just believe that because y'all woke up next to each other that he had to be there. My thing is, I knew that Roland had something to do with it because you already been in jail for a relationship murder. It wasn't supposed to go this way, but then when you said you got an inmate that's locked up right now, I said, oh, Roland met dude in jail. Most of the time, a lot of situations like this happen from, hey, we were cellmates and we came over and we came cool. Criminals, they fucked up in the head. You know what I'm saying? And he should never even been out anyways. Because he deliberately killed the other guy. To be honest, that probably was a whole setup in his first. Man, Cheryl was failed by the justice system because he should have never been out from the first murder in the first place, right? So let's just finish it up.
Who he had met in prison, and he had given Frederick a spare key to Cheryl's house. McKee was instructed by Roland to sneak into Cheryl's place before 11 p.m., so before she came home from work, and then when she got home, McKee was supposed to jump out and ambush her and tie her up and abduct her. Roland had actually gone with McKee to a hardware store to purchase the rope and duct tape that McKee would use to tie Cheryl up. But when McKee actually got to the point in the plan where he was physically removing Cheryl from her home to go take her who knows where, that was when Roland was going to jump in and save the day. And Roland had really thought about how this moment was going to go. He was going to kick the front door in and jump inside and scream at McKee, "You can't do this!" and then attack him with his judo skills until McKee ran off scared, at which point Roland would cut Cheryl free and she would grab on.
But with that story, like let's also be real. How the fuck would you be able to even at her house? It makes no sense for you to even be at her house.
His thing for her, the excuse for him to be there was for them to talk and win her over. And that was probably gonna be his thing. He do that. And he was like, I came over here because I wanted to confess my love to you, and I wanted us to.
And I just ran into him to it.
And it just so happened to be the same. Like, I don't know, child. That's crazy.
He ran off scared, at which point Roland would cut Cheryl free and she would grab onto him and say, "Oh my goodness, you saved me. I love you. I need you." And then after this, Roland believed they would get back together and they would live happily ever after. However, on the night of October 15th at 11:30, when Roland looked at his watch and saw it was time to go save his ex-wife, he stood up so quickly from the couch because he was so excited to go do this thing that he had one of his low blood pressure episodes and he fainted. And then when he came to a little while later, instead of going out the door to really at this point stopping this abduction from happening, Roland just kind of trudged upstairs and went to sleep. And this was a really big problem because Frederick J. McKee, the meth cook, he was hired to actually abduct Cheryl. He was not aware that this was actually a setup for Roland to come in and save the day. McKee literally believed Roland wanted him to abduct his wife. And he didn't ask any questions. He just said, okay, I'll do that. And then when Roland didn't show up, Frederick went through with the actual abduction of Cheryl. And during this abduction, things got out of hand and Frederick wound up beating Cheryl to death. Both Roland and McKee would be convicted for the murder of Cheryl Petrie. And by the time the cops had finally solved this cold case, Roland was actually already in prison for attempting to kidnap the son of another ex-wife in an effort to impress this ex-wife. It had not worked. Roland was ultimately sentenced to 40 years in prison, which was on top of the 25 years he was already serving, and McKee would get 20 years.
20 years? I
That's
swear, the damn child.
Man, he a serial criminal. Maybe I'll say this, maybe because Roland don't sound like a killer himself, so maybe the first murder he didn't do, but he had some participating in a plot, conspiracy. He's part of the conspiracy to commit murder, so he had something. That's the reason why he only got 6 years.
He commit them with his mind, but don't physically act out.
Like you got, I'm talking about like create the whole plot. He's correct.
I know what you're saying, babe.
You said committed with the mind.
I said because he come up with these elaborate plans in his mind.
What the fuck is he thinking though? Like this nigga's crazy. That's 3 different occasions. You set something up that.
And my thing is with.
And 2 of them led to a murder.
With his ex-wife. First of all, that was the stupidest plan. That was so stupid. Like what? But my thing is, if you're going to have somebody do that, tell them the whole damn plan. Like, hey, this is my ex-wife, so take it easy. You know what I'm saying? Like that's.
Or don't do it at all.
Don't. Period. Don't do it at all. But the fact that you had came up with this plan, but then tell the whole plan to the person that's supposed to be actually doing the crime, that's just weird to me. Like it's weird that you even coming up with that. You could have came. Maybe you could have bought her some flowers. You could have bought her some chocolates, wrote her a letter, took her on a date.
Or you could have just stopped cheating, my nigga.
Took her on a date. Or you could have just moved on. Take care of your kids and move on.
You got out of
because
prison, you really want to be with her, just don't cheat, bro.
Or because obviously you can't help, you can't stop doing that. You know what I'm saying?
He can't stop coming up with murder plots and
or in that
conspiracy shit. Like that's
take
who
care
he
of
is.
your kids, co-parent, and move on. Because
he shouldn't just got 6 years for conspiracy to commit murder on the first situation. That's what it really was. If he had some kind of association with it, and somebody died, he still should have had way more than 6 years. And Cheryl would be alive. And the other situation wouldn't have happened. Like, at the end of the day, the judicial system failed the first guy that died. Because y'all really don't even got the person who killed him. Yeah. Y'all just got him with being an involvement in the murder. Mm-hmm. Then this situation, so weird. That shit. Well, he technically he told them the truth. He told them everything, but giving them the last part because he did pass her. I thought maybe he did go with the dude. How the dude? Well, we don't know because that's Frederick has to tell his part of how the whole murder, how he took over there and Banner, how you got back and. But he a meth head, you know. That's the same way a crackhead. They'll do anything for, you know.
Did he walk all the hour back to whatever?
Nah, he probably had some help.
That's crazy. That is insane.
It was like I was just hired to kill her.
In his head, that's what he thought it was. Yeah,
He was hired to kill her. And that's conspiracy to commit murder. So isn't that like, damn,
hired
to abduct? But when you hire somebody to abduct someone,
and then it got out of
and
hand.
if it get out of hand, at the end of the day, you still hiring somebody to murder somebody because you never know.
Anything can happen.
Exactly. So it's still a conspiracy case. You know what I'm saying? Like, come on now. Like, what?
That is so.
And then it took y'all all the way to 2002. 2002 to solve the case. That's a long ass time. That's a long ass time. That's a long ass time for a cold case when the killer was right there the whole time. And when they said Albany, like I was like, unless he done told all these people to say the same story in alibi. I was like, at one point I was like, y'all got me. I'm like, he might be the. I was like, it just.
You know, situations to be like this, always like that one odd person that's weird and people like it has to be, and then they always like check out.
And then like, Ballen said this. Hey, his dad did live by PJ
and
Market.
Mama lives right.
And Mama lived right next to the.
And it's like, what the coincidence?
And everybody would be like, oh shit, we really do need to look into that man. Come to find out, he ain't got nothing to do with it.
And you know something I'm thinking about now? I'm like, what's so crazy? Would y'all have even solved the case when y'all solved the case if he wasn't in prison talking?
No.
Y'all wouldn't.
Nah, cause my thing is
y'all would have took him off the radar because y'all already kind of did because he was so cooperative. He gave y'all a key. He checking in, wanting to be like.
If I was a detective. After he got locked up that last time, it would just sent the red flag to go look at the Cheryl case.
Or to never take him off of, like, he's always going to be, I don't know, man. Because
reason why I say that is because, all right, somebody died, you had some involvement with. Yeah. This time, somebody died, we stopped looking into you. Mm-hmm. Another case, adoption case, and, you know, we didn't know. Well, it wasn't told, but I guess somebody didn't die from that situation. Yeah. But you still, so you have like just something in the back of my head has to say he has to have some type of involvement in this. Yeah. And I would have kept going back year after year after year. Well, I would have went back, talked to him. All right, let it die off. 2-3 years later, come back to him just to see if his story changes any. Yeah. Come back to him a couple of years. See, if his story starts changing a little bit, all right, it's time to turn the heat up. Because your story will always... Well, technically, his story will always stay the same.
It was like... Because that's...
He had a tight alibi.
His story, what he told them, is true. Yeah. He was never on the scene. Like, he never went. It's just he left out the part of... I hired someone so I can win my ex-wife back. You know what I'm saying? So technically, his story would have always stayed the same.
You're right. Yeah, you're right.
And even if they kept like revisiting the case and the evidence and opened the case back up after it kind of went, cold, his DNA would have never been on anything. He wasn't there.
He passed the fuck out.
You know what I'm saying?
And then you like shit. Well, fuck it. And then how the hell you gonna whoop somebody if y'all actually passing out just from getting up so damn quick? Yeah. Like, what the fuck you really gonna do? I shoot. Oh shit. Well, I can't look to you to protect me. If that nigga hit you one way, you going down. Down go Frazier. Like, bro, you ain't finna protect nobody if you getting up too fast.
And sorry to that sweet girl, honey. I put her in this. She ain't had nothing to do with it.
I ain't like.
I was just like, I was just thinking of everyone that he mentioned that was in her life. Yeah. Because I'm like, you mentioned these people, I'm thinking for a reason because you want my mind to go there.
I ain't really look at her like that.
I didn't look at her like that. I was just like, or possibly did she? But then I was like, what reason would she have to? But
I just knew it.
I never expected this.
I just knew it was somebody she had came across possibly before. That was in my mind because I was like, she's too nice of a lady. Yeah. And people take advantage of nice individuals. I don't know why, but the dude, even the Albany dude, I was like, hey, Albany dude, I was like, I ain't really looking at him. Even when he was, I was like, in my head, I'm just like, Roland has something to do with this shit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you ain't telling me you just went to jail, came back. You damn near, basically, you got away with murder.
Yeah.
And you only had to do 6 years. You got away with murder.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what type of involvement you had with his death. You might not have been the one that actually laid the fatal blows or whatever, but you still had some involvement, so you still got away with a murder. You come back, you looking for...
And I wasn't 100% taking him off the table. I just didn't know if he did have involvement, what involvement.
I'm gonna tell you with you probably got stuff like what Ballen said. He had a strong alibi. You like that?
I didn't. I didn't even.
The alibi thing. Then
no, because I watch too much stuff. They be having real life stuff. They be having tight alibis, and then you revisit things and you start piecing stuff together, and then you can like pick something apart. And you're like, okay,
his
there's a gap right here. But his alibi was true.
It's just the fact
that he left out the
fact
that I hired a meth head. Like what?
Yeah.
That's some shit you see in a movie. Literally. I mean, I know, but this situation happened and then...
Yeah, no, I'm saying, like... Yeah.
That's weird. Don't, please. Let me go. Let me go. Please.
Hey, man, y'all spend what's up in the comments. Y'all let us know y'all thoughts about it in the comments. Fast, man.
Come on now.
And I ain't gonna hold you.
And those sweet babies. Oh, my gosh.
And he had to, 9 times out of 10, had to raise them.
Until he got caught. Well, until they realized
he was in jail.
Oh, he did go to jail.
He went to jail. Look at his ugly ass. That's a.
And why I feel like I've seen him before.
That's an ugly ass individual.
I don't know, but anyway,
look like he stank.
But those sweet babies.
Cut that damn hair off. You ain't got no more. You just go bald headed, my G. Damn.
Yeah.
Ugly ass motherfucker. But yeah, shout out. Like, I do feel sorry for the kids because the kids they're gonna have to live with the fact that think about it. They were little, but they had an understanding of what their mom went through, right? And then they were raised with their dad, possibly. And then now to come later on find out my dad is the one who killed my mom. That's fucked up. That's crazy.
That's responsible for my mom's death.
Well, yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Hey, man, y'all spam us up. Y'all let us know y'all thoughts and opinions down below, man. But as always, I do go with the name DJ the Kid. This is.
We go and get it. Ain't no time to kick it. Got a stack of flip for my folks. Dollar. Please tell me you can hear me. Don't turn your back.